What are some of the key trends that lead in the discussions at today's event?
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about, of course, how organisations can improve their security. So that's what my talk is about. I still think organisations are not getting the basics right. There's a lot of people talking about AI and the impact of that on security. It's a bit too early for me, I think. So although a lot of people are talking about it, I'm not sure really we should be worrying about it too much. We need to be aware and doing things to try and protect ourselves against the potential in the future. So I think there's a lot of topics around that. Still ransomware, social engineering, they're all big topics, unfortunately, because we've been talking about it for years and we're not making much progress, I don't think. But those are the sort of major topics I think people still bang on about when they're talking on their stands. And obviously what we talk about in our talks as well, quite frankly, because it is a big problem, that we're trying to address through education and all other things like that. So, yeah, similar things in my talk. I talk a bit about that. Big breaches at the moment as well, so lots to talk about there as well.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, the cyber threat landscape is ever evolving. It's non-stop. What are some of the challenges that customers are facing, when it comes to protecting themselves against this, this threat landscape?
Yeah, so I think more recently we're seeing a lot of pretexting. I don't know if you've come across that, but the idea is that it's more realistic, so they do a lot more detailed investigation. We've talked a lot about the fact that the hackers have been fairly targeted, but only really focusing on larger organisations or nation-state actors targeting businesses using this kind of pretexting concept or looking into more the detail of the target. But more and more now I'm seeing that kind of bleeding into just general attacks to just more broad organisations. There's still lots of opportunistic attackers out there, but we're seeing more of that becoming, more targeted, more focused. You're seeing more and more text messages, WhatsApp messages, more LinkedIn kind of content coming out that's very, very well written, understanding their targets, all those sorts of things. So I think that's getting worse, and people are getting worse at detecting it and dealing with it. And of course, from a defender's perspective, it's also hard to find because you're not monitoring WhatsApp, you're not monitoring your text messages of your employees. It's hard to detect the phishing attacks because they look so real. It just looks like a normal email. They're always getting through things like Microsoft 365 anyway. So I think there's a lot of those things where we need to be helping organisations, not just on the education front, because that's not working either. I think businesses are really struggling to make their education really work for them. So it's kind of limiting the exposure to your employees, making them make good decisions by reducing what they can do. And I'm not just talking like zero trust. I think it's broader than that. There's a few more other concepts people should be thinking about. One of the big ones recently I've been talking about, which I talk a bit about in the talk as well, is how organisations don't think about really simple things like they allow people to use Chrome and they forget that you can sign up your Chrome with sign in with your own personal credentials, and then they forget when they're in a corporate world that people will do the same thing because they get their own favourites and all those sorts of things. But then what they forget is that people can then save their passwords, so they're saving their Microsoft credentials into their personal Gmail accounts, and then that's then their personal machines are getting compromised or their personal accounts are being compromised, and then all of a sudden we're starting to see ourselves actually in data breach data that there's people's Forex trading accounts mixed in with their personal Gmail accounts, also mixed in with all of their other passwords and also their corporate passwords. So now these data breaches are kind of exposing more of the internal corporate world because of bad practices around employees' own personal information and personal uses of their own systems. So there's a lot of that I think uneducated employees don't realise that these sorts of things are going on, and then they're making that assumption that they're kind of protected because they've got all these other security controls in place, and they're not thinking about that maybe clearly enough.
If you could use one word to describe the state of cybersecurity in 2023, what would it be and why?
Probably disconnected. Because if you think about cybersecurity investments and training, none of that is interconnected very well.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we obviously try to do, like shameless plug for defense.com, is to try and bring security together so you've got one place to go for all these things. And unfortunately, businesses really struggle with that kind of diverse set of security technologies. Like they've got a firewall over here that's telling them something, they've got a SIM technology over here telling them something, endpoint over here, do they need XDR? They've got an XDR maybe somewhere along the line. And they're sitting there going, I don't know which one of these is my priority. Which one should I focus on first? Do I look at this? And then they're worried that their users are getting phished, and that's not consolidated into one place, that's managed in a separate place. So I think that we need to consolidate, we need to bring more of this stuff together because we can make better sense of it. And that's where machine learning and AI starts to really come into its own. If you know that there's been phishing attacks, if you know there's a dodgy firewall, an attempt to get through the firewall or to circumvent some security control, all those things together makes you go, right, okay, I need to focus on this thing. At the moment, it's like, well, that looks like a high risk, that looks like a high risk. I'm going to deal with them all independently, but it might just be the same attack all happening at once. So kind of bringing that more joint joining the message up, basically bringing all the technologies together and making them work well for you, and also your procedures and your policies together as well, working together is going to make you more effective, and also reduce the burden on the team and make it easier for people that don't know security and don't understand it. I mean, most businesses don't get it, don't understand it. There's a really interesting stat actually, which I mentioned recently, which is that the S&P 500 companies, something like only 65% of those organisations have somebody who has security experience on their boards. So it shows as well that there's not a lot of like top-down kind of management around security and showing the importance of security. So we really need to sort of promote security from the top down as well. And that comes by helping out with this sort of disjointed issue, and solving that problem. So, disjointed, I'd say.